or good day, or good afternoon, or good evening. Wherever you are in the world, Office Hours is now going live for the how many? 800 and how many times, Mitchell?
93.
My goodness, that's a lot of time spending with this community, exploring not just video production and audio production and live presentation, but we've dove deep into community and we've dove deep into many other topics. But we are again focusing on how do we help each other in the communications, specifically a lot of technical things, and consequently, we have some wonderful people here that have explored how to do that and experimented. And consequently, every day we ask you to ask questions, and we have people around the world that are willing to come in and bring their experience. So I guess we're going to have Vienna read your questions, and then we'll see what the responses are. Let's have a great day. Go Vienna.
Our first question comes from Vienna Tran in Adelaide, Australia. That's me. And I want to know, Pretto, can you comment on the production value of the Artemis 1 stream thus far? For live rocket launches, what specific aspects of production need to be considered?
And let's see, Courtney's in there, but let's go ahead and take it in order at this point.
Go to John first, yeah.
Go to John first, please.
So I'm watching the live stream on YouTube on NASA's channel, and they've got some telemetry up there. They were showing the fill of the liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen as the oxidizer. And so you got a little bit of telemetry data on that, but I'm waiting to see how they do on the production value. None of them are doing a really great job. So we'll see how this goes today. I'm bringing a projector up to the mountains. I'm going to watch it with Fenwick and Keenan on our projector in the mountains, and then we'll all comment on production value.
But you're going to be in the mountains. How are you projecting a live image?
We have Starlink.
Of course you do. Of course you. Doesn't everybody? So, Courtney, what's your response?
Well, it remains to be seen, since we haven't seen NASA launch a rocket in a number of years. They do have a lot of coverage on the pad. We've been watching from the NASA cameras. They get a lot of coverage, lots of cameras around the pad. What I wonder is, will they have, it's been, 50 years since we saw any transmissions from around the moon. So I'm wondering, as it circumnavigates the moon, if we're going to have any live video coming back from that, and to see what kind of quality they can get. Maybe some footage of the mannequins, Skywalkers inside, from as it circles the moon and comes back. So if all goes well, of course.
And Mitchell.
It's neat to see a launch in 4K after, 50 years. And if you look really closely when they zoom in, you can see on the fuselage the sign that says, light fuse and run away.
Good fun. Alex.
I really think that NASA and most of these launches, but especially NASA, really misses out on the opportunity of a launch. This is a historic launch. This is a big deal, and they should figure out how to program 2 days worth of content into this. At least take the T- out to 4 hours and produce an incredible show that explains how spaceflight works and interviews former astronauts, brings people in, turns it into a spectacle that gets people excited and educates people. Right now they have the opportunity to inspire, to entertain, to educate all at the same time and have an unbelievable number of viewers. And when we talk about STEM programs and people wanting to be astronauts and people wanting to be astrophysicists and people wanting to be engineers, many of us got into what we did. I mean, I got into science, I got into physics, I got into rockets because of shuttle launches. That's what I grew up with was early shuttle launches. I got to take the day off. My parents would let me take the day off. So from school to watch the shuttle launches, and I was sitting there watching the one that didn't go well. But I watched all of those live, and then I imagined how I would do that, and it drove me to learn way more math, way more science, way more physics than anything that I got out of school. And so there's this huge opportunity to inspire kids that are, and looking at this stuff, and they just not totally missing it, but mostly like 90%, 95% missing the mark on what they could be doing to use these opportunities, because they're spending billions and billions of dollars on it. They should spend low millions on making sure that, we really get the full impact. A $3 or $4 million broadcast would go a long way. I mean, it would make more of a difference in STEM education in the United States than anything anybody else is doing.
Do you think that's the administration? Do they not have the budget allocated towards the marketing?
They
and
don't
the
prioritize it. They just don't prioritize it. It's all about priorities. Yeah.
Peter Sargent has a response.
I'll follow on to Alex's comment, except I'm going to date myself because my parents let me stay home for the Mercury launches.
There you go.
Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo launches. But I'm afraid they're going to be hard pressed to come up. I agree with you about prioritizing the 4 hours part. They're going to be hard pressed to outdo Walter Cronkite and Wally Schirra for the 4 hours prior to the Apollo launches that they used to do. I mean, and I doubt, I haven't been to Florida to see, but if you've ever, I was at the Apollo 14 launch, and it was amazing the number of network cameras and that were available to the networks to use that were in place so that they could do all the shots. Not to mention they had access to all the NASA coverage shots that were, in odd places that you're going to lose the camera as soon as the rocket lit off.
Those were a lot more expensive back then.
Yeah, they were.
and I do remember as people landing on the moon was such a unique thing that a lot of televisions were sold, but we also only had a few channels. Now we have over 300 different ways we can get communication. So, Alex, what would your response be to now that there's so many ways that we can receive media that's not just 3 channels?
If you made every one of these a scientific and exploration and spectacle, people would all show up. They'd stop and go to the one that made the most difference, made the biggest difference. We still see huge numbers of people going to, specific things. So it's not that it can't be done. It's just that you have to, but the problem is you have to do it over and over and over again. You can't just do it once. This is the problem with all people who do events, is that the events by themselves. I mean, NASA, in my opinion, should maybe not be doing this, but doing something like it where there's a weekly, Q&A where they're just answering questions about rockets and answering questions about this. But how you do that is you spark it with you use the big events to spark interest, but then you need to fill in and do things day after day or week after week, and put that together. I almost took a job a while ago to do video for a rocket company. And that was what we were talking about doing, was like, hey, we should just do a bunch of, we should shoot video all the time, post stuff all the time, have engineers take an hour out of their week, even if they're busy, to answer, just different. One engineer only has to show up every, year, and you have so many engineers, you just have different ones come talk about their specialties. And most of them like to talk about that kind of thing. They don't usually no one usually talks to them. Like a lot of the engineers are kind of dug in and they're doing their thing, and they don't get to go out in public and talk about what they're working on. And so I think that I think that you could do a lot to build that up. And I think that those kinds of things inspire kids, and inspire adults, kids of all ages, but especially kids, to be interested in science. And they have to get inspired. We can't just say we want to build STEM programs. They have to have a reason that they want to join a STEM program.
Well, and what peer concept would you recommend? Do we YouTubeify this, because that's where the audience is, and they get a.
I mean, NASA has its own television channel, so you could do it on television, but you could do it also with doing it over YouTube. I would definitely stream it to YouTube as well, which they do.
And the color commentaries would be people of all ages?
Well, no, I don't think. I mean, I think what people want to hear is experts. Like experts on it of all backgrounds, talking about. But you could fill up. I mean, you could fill up 4 hours before a launch in a heartbeat. So that's not that's totally doable. Even if you decided 2 hours, but the bottom line is we fill up 2 hours just answering questions. And if you took questions, the big thing is people think that they have to program everything. When you open a live event with hundreds of thousands of people, it's not like, we think like, well, what are we going to do? We have to, it's like salmon going up a stream. I mean, there's so many questions and so many things that are interested. The biggest problem you have is what questions to pick. But when you get into these hundreds of thousands or millions of viewers, you have an enormous number of great questions to work with, and you could do it all day, every day.
Well, I don't know if Courtney has another question, but he does have another response.
Yeah, I did. It's not on the one that's currently up, but a previous image there had a number on it, which was a number probably of the closed circuit camera that they were switching to, which had number 917. So can you imagine what kind of router and switcher they must have to be able to switch between over 900 cameras at a time? Must be massive.
Yeah, I don't know of a video router that big. Usually what would happen is we would have, the biggest ones that I think that we work with are 288s, the 288 routers. And what you would do is stack those routers up.
288 routers or 288
right? 288 inputs is the biggest.
There's 907.
Seen. So what you would do is I don't know how they're doing it, but what I would do is I'd probably have 4 of those routers feeding into a much smaller router. And then every time you make a request, it's an automated solution where it says, I want this one, and it routes that to a router and then to an input. So it all would feel instant, but you would probably be stacking those routers up. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Mitchell has one more response. And I think the last question I'm going to have is, so Vienna, do you think you got your question answered? But let Mitchell talk first.
To Alex's point, I think NASA is trying to promote their events a little better. The promo for the live coverage looks like a Hollywood trailer. It truly is very well done. They obviously outsourced it because it just doesn't have NASA fingerprints on it anywhere. And the other point, going back to Peter's saying the memories we had going back to the Apollo missions, I remember we had a black and white TV set. My dad ran out and got a color TV so that we could see the Apollo landing for Apollo 11. So he was a little disappointed.
That was the event that we pulled over on vacation to watch man land on the moon.
Sorry, so every time someone says they're trying, all I think about is, have you guys seen the Saturday Night Live thing about of Papyrus? I'm not going to play it on the show, Jeffrey, if you're watching, because we already got a strike this week. It's about Avatar, but there's someone says, well, they're just trying, and he goes, oh, whatever they're doing, it's not enough. They didn't try hard enough. So my only answer to their trying is, you only get to do these a couple times. Bring some specialists in and make it a great show. And I wouldn't bring Hollywood folks in. I would actually bring people like us in to build something out like that. But I think that because Hollywood would spend too much money, like a TV, if you brought in someone, and that's probably their problem, is they just don't know who to go to. So we'll see if we can fix that.
Well, we'll put our name in the hat.
Yep, exactly.
Get Tom Hanks in there, it would be brilliant.
Oh my gosh. And Tom Hanks would do it. Like if you built a great show, anything can be done with a vision. Like if you show Tom Hanks what it would be like, and NASA's behind it, and you're going to have these astronauts, because you've got all these astronauts from the space station, you've got all these astronauts that have done all these other things. You just start bringing them on, and this one you're going to bring on this group you're going to have a round circle about living on the space station and you're going to have people talking about the moon, and you're going to talk about talk about all the houses on the moon that they haven't shown us. I'm just kidding.
Kidding. For those that are keeping track, we've gone over our 2.5 minutes per question.
Yeah, exactly.
But we've had a great time, and let's go on to the next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette in Indiana, USA asks, my 2nd gen 12-inch iPad Pro got destroyed. I need to replace it before my traveling shows in November. Think I should hold off, or are we likely to see an M2 this year?
Oh, the drum roll, Mr. Lindsay. What's the answer?
Traditionally, the iPad would not be addressed until next March. That's the traditional release time, though they may move it up. But I think that Apple doesn't have any. It's not really a good business model to speed up rotations for a company. So a lot of people have talked about the iPad. I could be completely wrong, but it doesn't help them to necessarily go faster. It's already ahead of every tablet it's competing with. So there's not really any reason for them to accelerate that trajectory. So I wouldn't, it could happen in the fall, could happen in October, November. I would never buy a piece of electronics until I absolutely had to. And then when I do it, I don't worry about it. like this is the best it's going to be at this moment. The only time I really freeze is right before launches that we know are going to happen, which is like the iPhone launch. I'm definitely not going to buy an iPhone this weekend. Like that would be not the best move. If you're thinking about going out on Labor Day and getting a Labor Day sale on an iPhone, don't do it. Don't do it.
How about an Apple Watch? Which one?
I don't update as fast on my Apple Watches. I update about every 2 or 3 years for the watches. I don't. I went from the 4 to the current one last year. I don't, unless the only thing I have to admit, if they do body temperature, I'll buy a new. I'm really interested.
And the health for health reasons is why I'm interested. But let's go ahead and see what Paul Walhallis has to say on the next question. Vienna?
Paul Valhus, from Austin, Texas in USA asks, how do I get a little inset of myself in the lower right corner of my Zoom window like Josh does?
Peter.
Well, I happen to know Josh is an OBS user, so that's one way to do it. I do it with Memo Live, but I can also do it with something similar to it, just using the super source on my switch, right? And so Courtney will appreciate I'm just using the NASA feed as the second feed, so I don't think we'll get a strike from that. But there's all the switching software, and of course, if you have the Extreme ATEM Mini, they all have super source capability one way or the other.
Very good. Courtney.
Yeah, you don't even have to have the Extreme to get the which doesn't have the super source. Some of those buttons on there that Alex hates is the inset, which puts yourself in the lower corner there, and you can turn it on. Oh, when you put up another video, and you can put yourself in any 4 of the corners, and it's just a button push away because it has all those convenient buttons on it.
I just don't want to. I don't hate all the buttons. I just hate that there are so many. I don't know which ones to get rid of. It's not like I hate all the buttons. I don't want it to be a smooth surface like an obelisk. But
get rid of the sting button.
No. Make the sting button do its thing. Like
make them programmable.
Yeah, exactly.
Electrified.
I got to say, someone asked earlier this week, like, what would you like to see? And I said, I don't remember what I said, but I thought about it later, and I was like, the biggest thing that they could possibly do to the ATEM is make all the buttons programmable. If they made that, it would. I mean, if it was, and especially if it was able to send out OSC, like if there was something in there that you could push the buttons and they would do things, it gives you an entire, because there's a whole bunch of wasted buttons there right now. And if they gave you, it'd be like a Stream Deck on steroids.
I was wondering, I was going to say, it sounded like you're expressing the
much quieter keys.
Elgato. And then you could also put little icons in there of your own choosing too.
And tape them on.
John has a solution. John knows it all. Go. What's the answer, John?
So this is super popular on the Twitch network, where the guys that are playing the game chroma key themselves out, and then 99% of those guys all use OBS. They chroma key themselves out on top of their desktop screen, so you could watch the game and then you could see their reaction to it play. But super easy to do in OBS. So
there you go, Paul. John will be able to help you play that video game that you're both wanting to put yourself onto. So looking forward to seeing that, but let's go on to the next question.
I would personally love to see Snake with an inset. Anyway, Harshid Trivedi from Daytona Beach, Florida, USA asks, Sennheiser makes some great products, and recently they released the Momentum 4, which offer 60-hour battery and great connection for my S22. However, IE300 also should have a nice fun sound too, right? Which should I work towards first? $350 versus $300?
Okay, Alex, you're going to drive the tank. Going to drive the tank to this question.
A couple of comments. One is that 60 hours. Like I don't, maybe I'm old. I don't understand why I would need 60 hours of battery life. 24 hours makes sense. 20 hours makes sense. 60, I'm like, like, I don't know if so spending a lot of energy on that now. So that's one. The second thing is that also I've kind of grown to, other than I admit I spent more on my Apple Max headphones, but they are multifunctional. Like they do things that I do phone calls on them, and I can call Siri and I can do other things like that. And other than those, I won't spend more than about $200 on a wireless headset. Like it's just like, like if I'm going to spend real money, I want it to be wired in the highest quality and go through a DAC. And, like that's kind of my thing if I'm going to go up in price.
What's the qual for where does real money? What's that line start?
$200.
Okay. And that's your wife's protocol. She's
well,
helped you?
No. See, I have an allowance every I have an allowance that I live inside of that I earn. So I'm allowed to do anything I want inside that allowance. I just there's no questions. I literally have a separate credit card. Like and when it runs out, there's no more money. so then I just have to wait. So anyway, so I conserve it, especially around iPhone days, because I know that there's $2,500 that's going to go out the door next week. So I have to, or the week after. So I'm trying to conserve energy.
Well, you have that used to call that the Christmas club. So
I've been saving
Christmas
in
September.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in my family, everything shifts down. So I get the new phone. My wife's going to get the 13, and then my kids have 12s. Yeah.
Very good. Well, Hershey has a response.
Yeah, so for my ecosystem, it's Android. So the 60 hours in comparison to the Momentum 3s is the Momentum 3s had 17 hours battery life. And I have the Sony XM4s, but the sound quality from Sennheiser is better, superior-wise. So it's kind of a mixture. The sound, I think I'll probably get from both, but IEMs would look better on the show. So I'm just kind of a bit miffed on which route to go first. I kind of want them both. Because of the over-the-head Bluetooth if I'm on a travel, taking a train into Orlando or something. So that's the only reason for the 60 hours. And there are other brands such as the KZ's Timeless and other audiophile headphones, but they're not as comfortable. So that's the other thing. Sennheiser has a good, reputable name. So that's what I was trying to figure out if anybody has any extra thoughts.
Do these also have the noise canceling concept as well?
They do, and for my phone, you don't need a headphone jack wire. It uses a USB-C to USB-C, and you get full control as if it were a TRRS or headphone jack to headphone jack. So that's just they're all competing. They used to be $400 with the Momentum 4, but with these specifically, they've dropped in price $50 to compete in the consumer market on the Sennheiser side, since they have sold off the piece off to the consumer sector to a hearing aid company. And then you have the professional side of the Sennheiser division that you get all your more high-end expensive stuff. So just trying to see what's out there and see how to spend more money, right?
How to spend more money. Oh, let me need companies helping you do that. But how do they compare to the old Bose? When you said community
sound quality, I think Sennheiser brings a better punch to the table.
Wow.
Bose, their sound quality is just, you get that high treble, that sound. If you want your noise canceling, if you have an iPhone, of course, I'm going to say get the the over-the-head AirPods. Just because they offer so much sound and superior noise canceling, which no one's touching that.
Wow.
So,
sorry.
Well, between that one and then Sony is also jumping into the game. So Sony right now with the XM5 have the best noise canceling. So it's like everybody just throws them all at the same time and then, hey, which one do you want to buy?
Oh my gosh. Choices. Mitchell, what's your choice?
First of all, I don't understand, Hershey, why you're worried about 350 versus 300, because I know for a fact that you came across an extra $50 yesterday doing something. So that problem is solved. That's gone. But the other thing
what happens in after hours stays in.
No, I found it on the ground.
I didn't give anything away. I just happen to know that problem
is $50 bill on the ground in the
no
hallway
longer a problem. The other thing is that no self-respecting audiophile would use Bluetooth.
Of course, it's not for Bluetooth, but for travel, and then like I want to hook it up to a watch. So USB-C to my phone would give me a high quality, as if it were wired. So that's the functionality of that cable function. So I would rather listen to it wired. That's the whole intent. But if I'm on the go or whatnot, I mean, the 60 hours is just a point that, marketing point. But it's more so the Sennheiser sound gives you good sound quality versus anything else.
And in the bottom of the ninth, Courtney's going to bring it home. What's the answer?
I didn't realize it had a cable connection with USB-C that actually carried data across it rather than just charging. So that's so they can deliver uncompressed PCM data directly from your phone to your ears. So you're not going to undergo the insult of converting it to Bluetooth for your ears. I wonder about the active noise cancellation. The last time I tried something like that was the Bose on an airplane, and it just really, to try and filter out the noise of the airplane and the crying babies and the stewardess asking you if you want a second hot towel. It screwed up the music so much that it made it difficult to listen.
Yeah, well, when you're with me back in steerage, they don't give you a hot towel. You're already so close to the bathroom. Anyway,
you must fly first class now.
Well, you can. So we're moving on. Well, thank you. So hopefully you got your question answered. You got lots of opinions. It sounded like you've got a lot of thought into that. So come back and report when you find that you spent that extra $50 well. Okay, moving on. Next question.
I want to know, how do you train your voice to be broadcast ready? How much of it is nature and how much of it is nurture or training?
I think Mitchell's got some thoughts on that.
Well, Vienna, that's a great question to ask. I think it's almost a 50-50 scenario. You got to have the right genes to have the vocal cords there that can be trained, because you have to train them to get them to sound like a broadcast person. But, more and more these days, the style isn't going for somebody that sounds like me. It's more of a natural sounding voice like Sky. That's more of the style now. It's somebody that has some theater. But, the days of the Walter Winchell, Paul Harvey, "Good day, Paul Harvey, and that's the rest of the story." That kind of affected voice style is no longer happening. But I'm sure he trained a lot to get that.
Alex has got airtime a lot. What's your thoughts?
The biggest issue is learning how to relax your vocal cords. Like that's the first, that's one of the biggest problems that people have in the United States and in lots of other parts of the country. If you go to Africa, they have no problem with it. like it is an amazing, there's this bass that goes all the way to their chest that's just something that's oftentimes very natural for them to speak that way. And so it is but you can, when you start to become conscious to it, you can feel your vocal cord. You can feel the vibration. I don't know if it's not the vocal cord itself, but you can feel the vibration to about the middle of your sternum. And you can feel when you're tensing up and when you're not. And it's really something that it's a little bit of, training. That's a lot of training, is to learn to let that just vibrate. And a lot of people in different cultures will have a tendency, the culture will train them to pull their vocal cords up, because especially for women, it's a huge problem for women that they tend to take a higher register out of, and what you learn is they're doing it from a cultural perspective and something they learned when they were, growing up. And literally babies, they learn how to talk like everybody else. And if they can learn to, for anybody doing voice, is learning how to let that resonance just drop back down again. And so that's one thing. And then the other things are relatively straightforward in the sense that you need to learn to have variance. So I'm going to go up and then I'm going to come down. And I know why I'm doing that. I do it naturally at this point, and I don't do it all, I don't do it perfectly all the time. But you can see what I just did there. I made a point and then I made a side point. Like I just put that into parentheses, and understanding how you're going to do that and how you're going to go up and then back down. We have another problem in our culture where people end with a question all the time. Like, how about that? And you need to be someone who's, you see a little of that on TV, but not very much, because it really undermines authority. And it also doesn't tell the viewer where to go. So when I come down, that means I made a point. And so there's a lot of these like little, almost, it's not iambic pentameter, but similar to that, is that you get into a process that I'm going to go up, and I'm going to send, I'm going to describe the tree. So I come in flat, I'm going to go up the tree and then down the tree, and that happens a lot as you start to talk. And then again, of course, if you talk like this, it's kind of just to the side, like we're just talking here together. And then now I'm going to go back to what I'm doing here. But understanding what those things are, I think, is something you get used to as you do a lot of radio. The thing that I'm not as good at anymore, because I don't do as much radio, that I'm trying to get better at again, is not saying and which I still do. But it's harder when you're not reading something to do that. When you're just talking, it's harder to do that. And I'm trying to erase that again. I spent years not doing it at all, and I'm trying to erase it again from my vocabulary. I just did it there. See,
as an editor for corporate America, I got paid by the I did very well taking those out of the CEO's conversations. But Courtney has a response as well.
Yeah, you make some really good points, Alex, because I always hate when I hear someone that always ends in their sentence on an upgoing sound, and it drives me nuts. So
you've been to the valley?
Just drives me
Stop
nuts.
the insanity.
The elocution and diction are a couple of things you should study to make sure you speak clearly and you enunciate all your syllables correctly, but not get carried away like I just did, and to not let yourself trail off, because that's what I do a lot. I catch myself a lot of times just in a normal conversation, you'll just kind of let your energy flow down at the end, and people will lose it. If you're a broadcaster, you have to keep your breath flow up till you complete the sentence. Otherwise, you can trail off and people will go, "What did she say?" So those are a couple of tips.
Well, and projection comes from the diaphragm. So that's, again, my training is on stage. But Vienna, you asked the question. What is your response here?
Well, I'm not going to answer my own question, but I'm really glad that Courtney put his hand up, because at the start it was Mitchel and then Alex, and I was like, yeah, that's cool, but I need Courtney as well because he's here. So thanks for answering. I think, well, my motive behind asking the question was that I'm really passionate about getting better at speaking. In fact, I did medicine partly so that I could get better at communicating, because I was an absolute recluse before that. And I'm still working on it. So I said, see, look at that. I should get paid by the as well. And I think in certain fields, charisma is really important, and charisma comes like 70, 80% from nonverbal cues and the way that you speak. And I'm really trying to pull away from the way that people speak these days, which is like, I really am not very good at speaking. Like, do you know what I mean? And if you think that's in the Valley, it's every single city in Australia. So I'm battling it. I'm getting there.
Well, and that's because you're aware of it. You're making conscious effort. And let's, like anything that you're training yourself in these concepts. Also, you're practicing, you're listening to yourself, and that's sometimes the hardest. And you're also getting outside influence. So that's my response was, as an actor, we would seek to portray other characters, but we did have our tools, and has been specifically talked about, the articulators. Where is your tongue? The pronunciation of things, that where are the hard consonants? Are they in the back of your throat or in the front? So all of those elements. And again, a persona or personality on camera is much more intimate than on a stage, which is, and I've seen that you teach in classrooms. And you do want that energy because you're passionate about something, but you want them to understand you. And so that's where the articulators, and especially with all of the different dialects and different colloquial, sometimes the colloquials can get you in trouble. The things that are familiar to you, but may not be familiar to your audience. So those are, but that's in your writing. But Peter has a response.
So I will give you two pieces of advice, one to do and one not to do. One is know your topic. If you're in the mode of an interviewer and things like that, know your topic and be confident about your topic. But on that same vein, one of the premier interviewers from actually my parents' age was Edward R. Murrow, and I would not recommend you adopting a 4-pack-a-day cigarette habit to deepen your voice.
Cigars are
Good night
expensive.
and good luck.
I was
Go
told when I did, I think I said this before, but I took a couple voiceover lessons to try to tune up a little bit of what I was doing. And he said, you're going to have a great voice when you're, I think he said it was 65 or 45 if you start smoking a pack a day. He said, but that's the one thing I will say is that, you look at any artist, when you want to think about this, my last little thing to say here is you look at any artist, someone who's a bass player, a drum player, a dancer, a gymnast, anything. It's an incredible amount of practice and an incredible amount of, you're a violin player, right? So an incredible amount of practice.
Viola,
I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. Sorry. There's an incredible amount of practice and study and correction and process that goes into making that sound like anything that's worth listening to, right? And so that's years before it starts to make a noise that people like. Oftentimes, sometimes 6 months to a year. I think for my son's learning violin right now, so I'm saying 6 months to a year, maybe 2, before it comes out in a way that you really want to go up in front of a lot of people with it, your voice is just another instrument, that has to be practiced. And so you should come on the panel. This is my ploy to getting Vienna to practice all the time by joining our panel as often as possible.
And eventually, you too. No, that's the practice, and this is the CrossFit of opportunity in projecting the right amount and the ruthless reviews of things. So yeah, I second out Alex's request. But Mitchel has a closing commentary. Well, we do have 8 questions in the queue back in the back, so we could potentially use some more if people have some questions. But we're at a nice leisurely pace today.
But wait, there's more.
Go for Mitch.
Basically, I think in your question, you're saying broadcast ready, and that's a very specific tool set because when you're doing broadcast, you have a very short time to be able to sell something or make it interesting, like Alex was saying. And I don't relax my vocal cords. I could certainly sound bassier if I did, but my job is to cut through the clutter. So, on my demo tape, on my voiceover demo tape, I tried to do more variety. I tried to be, conversational, more like Courtney, without the radio part taking over. And yet they just refuse to accept that, and I'm getting car dealership spots where you're screaming or yelling. The other thing with broadcast is that there's really no grammar in a 30-second spot. There literally are no periods, maybe a bunch of commas and pauses, but you have to learn to be able to read like that and still make it interesting. And to Alex's point, the pentameter or the way the timing and the way you read is very critical. All that comes with lots of practice and just plain doing. It's just something you have to do over and over again.
Awesome. I think we're ready to go to the next question.
Paul Valhus from Austin, Texas in the USA asks, Synergy Beta 2 is out, which supports odd-sized screens on all platforms, and Alpha 3 is coming. What needs fixing and improving, and what is its future? It's a Ukraine and Austin-based company. Wiped an Alex drive. Oops, can this be fixed?
Go for Alex.
It didn't just wipe the drive. It literally made it thumped the computer. Like it took a lot to get it back out again. So you couldn't restart the computer. Like, it's not that the drive went bad. You couldn't actually get the computer to run. And that had to do with the fact that I dragged a file just over to one side, and it happened to get right on between 2 screens in Synergy. And for whatever reason, it just went into some cycle that caused an enormous amount of damage to the point where I wouldn't use it again. But what I will say is that if you're doing cross-platform and you need to jump from screen to screen to screen, it's probably the best solution. If you are on a single area, like Apple's, what Apple's doing by tying all of their devices together related to being able to drag from one to the next is for an all Mac user, probably they don't need Synergy. If If you are trying to use a different platform or you are on a mixed platform, I think Synergy, even though I had a bad experience, is probably the best solution.
Courtney's jumping in on that, responding.
I was just going to say the problem probably that caused Alex's dilemma was the fact that mainly on the Mac, they have a tendency to put icons that represent drives on the desktop, which is probably what got him into trouble. If you didn't have any drives, if you hid those drives, maybe you wouldn't have that problem, so that you wouldn't be tempted to accidentally drag a drive off onto another machine where it tries to copy the entire drive to another machine. And that's why it hung up in the middle of that. And then you have to bail out of it because it takes so long to copy between two machines that you don't know, or it can't copy it. So you don't know what it's doing, and you turn the machine off, and that will hose the drive. So on the machine,
I left it hung there for 2 days.
For how long? 2 days. Okay. Yeah, so. Well, maybe it just can't do it. So it can't do it.
Again, if that is the issue, having a safety measure that says, "Hey, you just dragged a drive between two computers. Maybe I shouldn't do something without asking," would probably be a good idea. That's all I'm saying.
Well, Paul, you'll have to give us your response, how it turned out. Next question.
Craig Kadoki from Toronto, Canada asks, are any of the panelists using Dante-enabled speakers? Which ones and what for?
When the person that asked the question, go for Greg.
Yeah, I definitely threw the ball to myself here, but I've been checking out. I got a couple of these on demo. It's a nice little Glen Sound Dante-enabled PoE only. It's got one connector on the back, little speaker, kind of a replacement for what a lot of us have used with the old Fostex 6301s. It's a really, really cool little box. I just had them for a couple of days to experiment with them. It's got 4 inputs on it. Dante uses the Ultimo chipset. So you get 4 in. It can sum between inputs 1 and 2, 2 and 3, or all of them. Selector button on the front. Volume, and some really, really cool functionality that goes with that. You can set a priority channel, for instance. There's actually 3 different priority settings you can set on it so that you can have any input override all the other ones. Think like a backstage page type override. And a bunch of other really cool software functionality, built-in EQ curves and stuff like that. Really well thought out. It's got the EtherCon port on the back, so you can use a proper shell as well as just a regular RJ45, and 75 mil vest mount on the back, and both sizes of mic stands on the bottom. So I just thought, playing with it, I thought I'd share it with everybody. They're really kind of a cool little box.
Cool. Mark.
Well, if you're looking for a different type of speaker, those guys at the DVE store helped me with my conference room, and these are Dante-enabled speakers for a conference room that just hang from the ceiling above, and the Ethernet cable comes right down and connects to the top. So there's another solution.
Fun. Mitchell.
IP-based speakers, including Dante, are the way of the future. It's simpler to install. It's simpler to adjust them on a speaker-by-speaker basis. The downside is if you're using PoE, you're limited typically to 30 watts. So you're not going to be putting big speakers up there or inefficient speakers. You're going to be putting very efficient self-powered speakers that use the PoE. For example, Genelec makes a line of IP-based speakers. I think they're Dante-enabled also. They're a really good choice because they know how to deal with amplifiers that are efficient enough to take advantage of PoE and PoE+. But there's nothing better. If you've ever designed sound systems for like a retail business, if you have every one of those speakers addressable on a router, so you can create zones, you can page, like Craig was saying, to specific speakers, you can set EQ curves. It's just a way to go.
Beautiful. Alex.
They look amazing. I wasn't clear. I didn't know that Fostex made these. So I guess they're about 2 years old. It looks really, really, really interesting. Sorry, Craig.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. These are not Fostex. It's like a replacement for what we always used to use backstage as the Fostex. It's a company called Glen Sound out of Kent, UK.
Oh, yeah. Sound.
And they make a bunch of other products as well. But this was something that really caught my eye. Something
I just searched Fostex Dante, and because I think I misheard what you said, and so then I was paying attention to trying to find that. But it does look like a lot of those are pretty interesting. The other thing to remember is that any active speaker with an XLR input can be a Dante speaker. We use Dante in the office with the Audinate Avios. So that's an Ethernet to a small converter that will go to a XLR. And so I do think that, I mean, these are really cool. And I think that I'm going to do a lot more research on them. I had thought about them coming out. I haven't done enough research on it. So I think it's really cool. But you can also use the Avios to kind of get you most of the way there.
And Craig, going to wrap us up.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, the Avio is obviously a brilliant way to deal with some of this. It's just what GlenSound's done with this is to make a lot of extra built-in functionality. Like I said, the priority override. You can also set a group, they call it a pair, but you can do it for more than 2 speakers, which will mean that anytime you take one speaker that's in that group, selecting the input or change the volume, we'll do that across all of them as well.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
There's all this extra built-in functionality.
Right. So it's not just a dumb speaker. It's
there's a lot of functionality built into it, and they've got a Windows only, unfortunately, that you have to go through the Windows App Store to get, but a Windows only configuration software for it.
And again, I think that one of the things that we would look at is using something like for especially when we start talking about Dante and routing and everything else, to group them. If we were getting a lot of speakers, what I would still be tempted to do is do do some kind of audio thing, because I could use a BSS 326 or 806. It depends on how many speakers. I mean, they're elaborate and expensive if you are getting a lot of them. But if you get a lot of speakers, being able to group those together and have styles and say, I want to move the volume on these things, and you can put that on an iPad. They even have a little piece of hardware for it. So, but I do think these are really great, and I could definitely see installations where we'd put them in.
Well, and Hershey's got an extra $50, so he's going to go buy. How much are they?
Okay,
they're about $500 each.
Oh, okay. Well, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to ask Alex if he thinks, I know Dante is only on the wired networks, local area networks. Do you think that they'll ever be able to adopt to Wi-Fi 6, one of the higher speed Wi-Fi configurations to make them wireless? Will they be able to stay in clock sync?
Given my experience with wireless and audio, in Wi-Fi and audio, I probably wouldn't try that anytime soon. Like, I mean, maybe someday, but I think, and this is the hard part, is that people like me, you could put a product out, and until you've really proven the product and you get somebody, you'd have to really get an entire, couple concert halls to put everything in and run it all on Wi-Fi and do case studies before anybody would pay attention, because everyone would be like, oh, that's a bad idea. And you have to, so to get over that hump, a lot of times, and a lot of companies don't understand the hump that they're going over for people's always way of approaching that. And so they don't do that thing, which is they don't engage someone to create a vision and show people that this would actually work. Because once they do that, like for instance, there was an experiment that they did with Dante between, I think it was London and Scotland, where they did a Dante connection between the two. And that case study wasted millions and millions of research dollars. The reason being that they showed this case study and Audinate made a big deal about it. It's almost impossible. Like what they did is almost impossible to do in the real world, but they did it over a university network, over a limited speed. They GPS clocked both ends. And it was and it just barely worked. But they did a case study on it. And man, have I been pulled into, I can't tell you how many conversations I get pulled into where I go, hey, we're going to need to do this on a private fiber network with Maddie. We can do this with these things. And they're like, oh no, we saw the thing on Dante. It'll totally work. And I'm like, it's not going to work. And then we go down the path of spending enormous amounts of time and energy trying to get something to work that doesn't. But the point that I'm trying to make there is that it was a powerful case study that got everybody excited. They saw the vision. Now they all wanted to play. Now, regardless of the fact that they all ended up going over a cliff, the fact that that you got someone engaged to do it was a really powerful marketing tool. Now it's going to be hard for Audinate to dig their way back out of, everybody wasting all that money and time on it. They'll have a hard time getting over that hump again. And that's the thing. So you have to time both over marketing can do a lot of damage long term, but under marketing means that you can put out a great product that doesn't go anywhere.
Mitchell.
Yeah, it just a reminder, it doesn't have to be Dante. It's any IP-based system that uses that for routing, distribution, EQ, zones, and all those things. Just changes the whole paradigm. For example, my friends at Barracks have developed a tiny little self-powered box that uses PoE that will convert any speaker to IP-based or Dante. You just plug this little guy into the back of the speaker in an installation you already have, and now you've got IP-based speakers.
Next question.
Jeff C, JC does voiceover, Miami Beach, Florida, asks, I'm trying to test my audio and room acoustics for joining the panel. If I start a new Zoom meeting and record it locally on the same machine, am I getting my audio back from the servers, aka the final product?
Peter.
Well, the operative phrase he said is recorded on the same machine. And I tried this early on in office hours time frame early on and discovered that the answer is no. If you're recording it on the same machine, the Zoom client is stuffing your audio straight into the file. It is not sending it out. And I could tell that because I recorded it to the cloud and it sounded different. I could actually tell the difference. But I would suggest your best answer, if you really want to try this out, is join after hours and let everyone help you figure out your audio. Because that's what I ended up doing. They didn't call it after hours back then, but that's what I did.
Awesome. Mitchell.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to JC does voiceover from Mitchell does voiceovers too. Here's the thing. What you're doing, I guess, is that you want to compare to see how it sounds. And you may be adjusting your acoustics in your room or your mic or your EQ in order to compensate for how Zoom's going to throw it back at you. I'd say concentrate on the mic and the acoustics in the room and let that be your guide, not what it sounds like after it goes through all this other stuff. The other thing is if you come on the panel, you got all our ears to lend a hand, and chances are you're going to get a lot better feedback that way.
And the Ruthless reviews are for this exact reason, help us getting better. So Vienna?
Speaking of Ruthless reviews, when I asked that question about speaking practice and things, I think we should do a Ruthless reviews for speaking, not just for audio and video, because, you can have the best audio, but if you don't speak very well, then, it's not great quality. So I vote for that. Anyway, a wise person who sometimes comes on this panel once told me that if you want to test the way that you appear on either a recording or YouTube, you use QuickTime, and you go to QuickTime and you click new movie recording or new video recording, and you record yourself that way. And that's how I do my recordings if I wanted to send it to people who need videos from me. I don't use Zoom because Zoom does things to your video and your audio that it's very hard to control. So use QuickTime. Don't use Zoom if you can help it. Sure, if you've got someone who doesn't know how to use anything else other than Zoom, then that's fine. But Zoom will change things, and there's no way to fix that easily. So QuickTime is the way, and I don't know why, it just works.
So you've thrown the gauntlet down for finding a voice coach. Okay, well, we're on the hunt. But Hershey.
I just want to ask a question to Vienna. Was that a script that you were reading? Because it sounded like somebody that has been on the show here before and is on point exactly like how they would say it. But yes, I would say to JC is to come on to After Hours, and trust me, we'll tune you in. We always have our ears on. And the first thing is first, come to your first episode. Once that's, on a Monday or Sunday, pick a day. Pick one day that you think that you have it set and tight, and then go check it out on YouTube. Because YouTube is always going to do something different, and that outcome is going to be the end result you might give to a client or something. Hey, I'm on the show, you should check me out. So I would say that first, you already have what you need. You have a microphone, you do voiceover. So get in After Hours, get it tuned up where we could at least hear you. You're hitting negative 24 LUFS. After that point, hit the marks with coming into the show at showtime. And it's pretty simple. I mean, today makes 6 days in a row. I think it's pretty simple.
Vienna?
Rashid, quickly, you just asked me like something about some other panelist, and all I'm going to say is I learned from the best and no one else.
Cheers.
Courtney?
Yeah, well, I'll say one suggestion I'd have for JC does get a friend and set up a Zoom call and do your Zoom connection and have the friend record it on their computer locally. And that way, then they can send you the file and you can listen to it back, because Zoom will automatically apply that adaptive noise cancellation, because it does echo cancellation automatically and make sure you don't have any open speakers, et cetera. But it tries to do that anyway. So it affects your audio. And so you won't hear how it's affecting your audio, because it's affecting that audio that's feeding out, not that's being recorded locally. So have the person on the far end record it and send you the file. That way you can get a handle on how it exactly sounds.
Wow. Great advice. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer, I'm really sorry. Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira in Florida, USA. Which system do you find to be the best quality budget wireless lavs?
Peter?
Well, I've had really good luck with the Comica brand of wireless lavs, and I've got 2 generations of them downstairs in my kit that I take out to Boy Scout camps. And the latest ones are good for up to about 300 feet in distance, and they're all FCC legal. And that's probably the most important thing to worry about, because you can find some out there still that are not FCC legal. How they get into the U.S., I don't know, but they're out there.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that there's like basically 3 groups of stuff. There's the kind of the consumer, the prosumer, and obviously the professional level. You're going to look at there's a group of, Saramonic, Rode, and DJI are kind of living in the consumer-ish. And in some cases, they can work a long way. I've had the Rodes go solid 40, 50 feet without any real issue. We have some folks here on the panel that are using the DJIs, and they've been happy with them. And I've also used the Saramonics successfully. So those are, and there's a bunch of them in that group, but those are mostly using some version of 2.4, signals. And so putting them getting you between the transmitter and the receiver oftentimes causes them to break up. So you kind of have to put it on your hip rather than on your back. So thinking about those kinds of things are important. And you want to be a little bit closer. But if you're doing, let's say, cooking, or you're doing it in your office, or you're doing it in, those types of things, those are going to work just fine. If you're a couple feet away, a lot of times what we do is we put the receiver somewhere very close to the speaker. There's, put it under a table, at a corner of a table or something where it just doesn't have to jump very far, and it gives you the room to move. We've had ones where we have speakers doing presentations, and they're going to do them but they want to walk around and move in a circle of like 10 feet. Wiring them up is really painful. This is a way better solution for them to kind of just go down that path. So that can help a lot. Then you go into the kind of the prosumer. Those are some of the lower end Sennheisers, those kinds of things. And you're going to see those run between $300 and $1,000 per channel. And those are going to be kind of, they're better. The ENG 100s, the real problem with the Sennheiser ENG 100 is everybody's got them and no one changes the frequency. So they step on each other all the time at events. And so that's the challenge you get into, but there's higher level versions of those. And then you have the professional ones. And so now you're talking about audio limited from sound devices, the Electrosonics, and then you start getting to Shure. Like if you're in an industrial, so that might be even a fourth one, but the rack mountable. And what our go-to for the high end is the Axients. So that's really where we, like every event that I do is I just use Axient. I don't experiment. If I'm on a film set, then we're doing we're typically using Electros, and we've been some folks have been experimenting with the audio limited stuff.
Vienna.
So I have a live demo of something really budget, because budget is my middle name. So I have that. It depends on what you need it to do. The question didn't specify whether you need a wireless lav for a live event or whether you want to record something and then process it afterwards. I do the latter because I go to schools and I speak, and then I want to mix it in with the video that I keep for myself for speaking reference. Anyway, I have this Paulson lav mic. It's really tangled. Sorry to anyone who doesn't like tangling. And then this is what I do. I do this, and then I plug it into my adapter, and then I put it into my phone, and then I plug it onto my shirt, and then I start voice recorder on my phone, and then it's recording. And I think this was in the tens or 20s of dollars, minus the shipping. So easy. Like, I can do it. So I would recommend that for those who want budget.
Courtney.
Well, there are two different classifications of wireless here. There's digital wireless, which are the newer ones, which usually transmit over the Wi-Fi spectrum area, 2.5 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz, the open area of Wi-Fi. And then there's the analog, the old analog version, which would be the Sennheiser, like the EW100s, Gen 3, which are just a single RF transmission in the 7 to 900 range. I don't know where they ended up now after the channels rearranged everything. The analog ones fail more gracefully. You'll just hear a little hit or a little or a little noise when they start to get out of range. The digital ones, it just goes away. So that's a consideration. I found the DJI, that's right. He got me saying DJI mic, which is what they call it, DJI mic, they only make one, is pretty good as far as features go, because its range isn't that great. It's definitely line of sight. You want to make sure that the receiver and the transmitter don't have anything in between them. In other words, if you put the transmitter on someone's back and you use a lavalier microphone to plug in, you got to put the receiver behind the person, because just that signal traveling through their body to the receiver is going to shorten their range to just, a few feet. But the saving grace of the DJI is that it records locally. You just hit a button either from the receiver or the transmitter, and it starts recording locally to its own internal memory, full digital signal of anything that's coming into that microphone or the microphone input. So you always have a clean wave file that is, you can plug that transmitter then into your computer and download that file, and you have a clean wave file with no transmission artifacts, even if you lost the transmission coming between you and the receiver. So if you're not doing a live event, I'd recommend the DJI as a cheap way to get two microphones and a single receiver into a single video recording.
The Rode Go 2 system that I just used this week, I'm always surprised at the battery's life of that. I will charge them, but they continue to hold and hold. But that getting two microphones, the Rode Go 2 has that system. But I did find that the receiver has a different, the TRS has a different adapter than the Rode Go 1. So I wanted to make sure when you plug your receiver into your camera or whatever recording device, is that you have the throughput. You'll need the right adapter for that. So let's see what the next question is.
Gus Libby from Satellite Beach, Florida asks, can anyone identify a method or resource to help local musicians learn to evaluate or improve how their music comes across to the audience? For example, music too loud for the venue, highs chopped, voice and guitar imbalance.
Alex.
Yeah, the best way to do that is to have an audio engineer. That's what their job. That's actually their job. So their job is to sit there and do all the things you just listed, is to have somebody who actually manage it. Now, I know what your issue is probably most likely that you have artists that are setting up on their own, and they're going to have some amplification. It's a small budget. They get paid to be in the corner of a bar or in somewhere, they're not on a stage as much as, but like a corner stage, and they're 100% accountable for that. And in that case, getting in early and really getting some feedback, and then having a friend tell how does it sound, and potentially even recording. Like if you have a little mobile recorder, you can tell a lot from what's actually happening in it. If you stand about a middle of the crowd, not in the front, not in the back, middle of the crowd, hold up that mic, have somebody do that for you, and then go back and listen to it. It's not going to be perfect, and it may over modulate, but it'll start to give you a sense of it if that's all you have. But it is very, very difficult to sound right without a third party that is going to sit out there and look at it. With trained ears.
Deanna.
I second Alex on all of that. When you talk about the audio engineer stuff and the idea of a method or a resource as if it's something that you're going to measure, that's objective and that's one thing. But if you're talking about music, that's a subjective experience. So I definitely agree. Bring a friend, hire an office hours buddy, take them to the dive bar and ask them for feedback, and make sure the musicians are open to that feedback and the people working with them. I did a speaking event in a dive bar. It was very interesting, and I was just there by myself. I didn't hire a Carl, and because he was busy with other photography and things. So I got a tripod and a camcorder. I set it up in the middle of the room, and I just had a friend to make sure no one steals it, and it was just sort of plug and play. And I did the event, and then I went and stopped the recording, and then I can listen to it back as well. So it's I think it is a person by person thing, and you cannot use a software to interpret music.
Alex.
The other thing to remember is that in most major markets, there's going to be a sound program at a university. There's going to be a sound program there's going to be radio. There's going to be sound mixing schools. Do a search for that. I mean, literally, they're almost everywhere. They're just hidden in some building that used to be a radio station or used to be a studio or whatever, and they're now doing classes. You can often find students that are going to be happy to come and help you. Are they the master mixers yet? Maybe not, but they're usually open to playing and doing stuff for not a ton of money. Sometimes beer. But I think that you can pay them a reasonable amount of money. That's some chunk. It doesn't mean you have to take them every single time to every gig, but to try to figure out what settings you have and where they are, taking them to 3 or 4 gigs in a row would probably make a big difference. It probably wouldn't cost you much because they don't need to be there the whole time. They just need to be there for an hour, listen to it, and just make sure that it sounds okay.
And at a live event, of course, mic placement is critical. Alex?
Well, this is going to be. I mean, I'm assuming that this is a 2 or 3 mic system. This is a person who's coming in with a. I mean, the typical setup is they've got one instrument in themselves. Sometimes they're pretty creative and they have, a mixing, Ableton Live and an instrument in themselves, or a looper and Ableton Live and a mixture in themselves. But it's all kind of a one-person show there. So the mics are usually pretty local to them. Obviously there's some mic placement, but it's not really mic placement like they're talking or like it's a shotgun. It's performance mics. I mean, these are typically SM58s with instrument inputs. I mean, I'm assuming that that's what we're talking about here. If we're not, then ask more questions.
Well, Gus, we look forward to more questions. And let's go to this next, though.
Well, my last question that I'm asking, Harshid Trivedi from Daytona Beach, Florida, USA. Do you feel studies from space will aid in returning sight or helping other needs?
Deanna.
Oh, I got to unmute again. That's a great question. One of the issues that happens in space, in microgravity, is that we get fluid shift towards the head, which increases pressure on the optic nerve, which connects your eye to your brain, and it also puts pressure on the back of the eyeball. And that can cause unpredictable long-term long-sightedness or possibly blindness. Thankfully, we haven't had people in space for long enough that that's actually become a problem. But if it were to happen, then glasses might not fix it because you're affecting the signal itself rather than the visual acuity. Will it help with returning sight? I think any research that we do in space is so much down to the micro level and sometimes to the cellular level in such detail that, of course, it's going to contribute to studies on Earth. When we image the optic nerve, when we look at the pressures in the back of the eyeball, for example, that's going to help with people on Earth in other ways. For example, fighter pilots who take big dives, and they'll have that same sort of pressure. And then that can help us inform countermeasures for both astronauts and Earth citizens to help with eyesight. So I think space itself, it's just lends itself to detailed investigations and studies about physiology that will help with Earth. And people are going to be motivated to do that anyway, because any paper that says we can help Earthlings will get you funding. So it's a really good point. In terms of helping other needs, that's a whole second hour.
Very fun. Courtney.
Yes, Vienna covered that very well, especially as far as the neurological problems of the optical nerve. And it depends upon your source of your vision loss. It can be mechanical. It can be problems with the cornea, the lens, the eyeball, the retina, or the optic nerve or the brain. There's hysterical blindness, things like that. There have been great strides that are tangential to aerospace development, which have to do with microminiaturization, hardening of components to work in really difficult temperatures and high humidity, high heat, high radiation, et cetera. And those kind of advances may lead to things like the cochlear implant or like the neurological implant that can implant simulation into the visual cortex of the brain. So who knows that eventually that even the profoundly blind might be able to have some degree of vision by neural stimulation. So I think the miniaturization and the lowering in power of these electronic circuits have been achieved by advancements for space technology can be applied to human medical technology as well.
Peter.
So there was throughout the space program, and even before when it was NACA, not NASA. There was a lot of work done on the eye, understanding the eye for high impacts of high G maneuvers, because those things came out. And then more recently, now recent is within the last 10 years, vision was actually part of the work that was done between Scott and Mark Kelly, the astronauts, because Mark was left on the ground as the control subject while Scott spent a year in space. And then they started to compare things when Scott came back. And there were definitely vision changes, and there were other changes, things like bone mass density and things like that occurred. But they're learning. It's always learning. I particularly like Courtney's comment about the vision equivalent of a cochlear implant. Those may have to come into play for really long-term visits, or we're going to have to figure out how to do, like the 2001 Space Odyssey, have the centrifuge so they simulated 1G gravity while they travel.
The two brothers, I'm wondering which one got the short straw, but
well, it depends on your no pun intended. It depends on your view of life, right? I think a year in space would be kind of cool. To be honest,
that's what I mean. That's an interesting thing. But that's great science. Let's take it to the next question.
And first of all, thank you, Vienna. You did a great job there in the first hour reading. Congratulations. Good job. Peter Sargent is here from Round Rock, Texas. Alex, so what happened to cause the strike on the live stream the other day? I didn't even know that could happen. Shades of the old live TV censor.
Alex.
So there was no specific strike, and we didn't get a strike. I spoke a little bit more widely. It is blocked in some countries, so the UK and Germany are not making it available. But oddly, Australia thinks it's fine. The United States is fine. And there's just some areas of it that are cut out. It appears that, so what we were doing is we were talking about blocking, and we used some movies, and Bill used some copyright material, and I used some copyright material. And at some point, it reached a threshold that was too much. too much copyright material for this program, and it was just turned off while we were showing it. What was amazing is how quickly it just recovered. Like it didn't in the old days of YouTube, it would just turn off your stream and then you were done. In this case, it just turned it off while we were showing the thing, and then came back to when we started talking. They're like, "Oh, they're not doing that anymore. They're not. They've come back." And they just went right back to showing us again. So, but it was it appeared to be some level of threshold, but without a specific area. So I think that it was fine. We're probably not going to fix it. I apologize to folks that didn't see it. Trying to cut it out would cut out the show. Like that's what we were talking about. So it'd be very hard for us to go back and fix that. But if, I'm sure people can figure out how to watch it. It was a good show. I thought that we actually had some good conversation there. But it has gotten easier. I was actually surprised. I expected us to get a flag almost immediately. And because we don't monetize the show, I didn't care. Like I was like, I get a flag, and it didn't bother me. I didn't realize it was going to turn off the actual video. So that was a good lesson in telling us. And for me, it's good if you can't see it, definitely, if you can't see that in your country, we'd like to know, because it's good research for us. Like what countries don't allow that video to be. We know that it's not allowed in Germany. It's not allowed in the UK. But we don't know what other countries have got backwards ideas of how to do that. Anyway.
How quickly did it return? Just like as soon as you started talking?
Yeah, seconds.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. That's different.
It's pretty impressive, and much more flexible system than when we started.
Yeah. Just shutting you down and you're done for the day. Peter.
Well, I was going to say the only problem is because I was watching the live stream for what it's worth. And the error message that comes up is not exactly indicative of what's going on. It just thinks, oh, Alex did something very, very wrong.
Right, exactly. It definitely was not as clear as it could be. Yeah. We are going to, by the way, one thing that we have to do is figure out who's starting the YouTube stream, and that person has to be available to watch that video, because what should have happened there is we should have gotten a warning on the YouTube live studio window that said, for 3 or 4 minutes, it should have said, "Hey, I'm drowning, not waving," like you're about to get turned off, and so it probably happened and we weren't watching, and so it's just it's something that we'll put into the pipeline. It's not a big deal. We're not going to do. I'm pretty careful about not doing that because I'm pretty clear of what will happen, and I wantonly flaunted the rules. So I understand that.
Alex, don't you wish for the good old days when you were pushing all the buttons?
I don't. I'm trying to push less buttons every day.
Courtney?
We know the live stream disappeared, but did the Zoom recording contain everything? And did the posting on YouTube of the recorded show from Zoom, or whoever does the recording, I don't know, maybe they record on the back end separately, are those hosted? Do those have those segments edited out, or can people go now and find them on, officehours.global?
We don't record on Zoom that I know of. Maybe we
record locally in the back end.
We don't because that's an enormous amount of data that we have to manage. So we may get to a point where we record a version of this every day. But right now, we don't have the resources to. So
the shows that are aired, you go online and you can go to the archives and play back a show. Those are stored only in YouTube?
That's correct. Yeah. If YouTube went down, they'd all be gone. So there'll be some point. My goal is to build that out by the 1,000th episode. And so after 1,000 of these, we'll start turning something. But we have to figure out our resource situation first.
Appreciate.
What I wanted to share is that video felt like watching football and somebody was, play by play. So your telestrating skills are just amazing as far as almost an audio description of what's going on. Like, hey, this is happening. So, that particular video was based on that information. So I get it. Algorithms pick up the, different scenes or whatever. But Yeah, I was just blown away with the explanation. So it actually painted a picture in my head. So and my mom and I were watching, and she's like, "Hold on, be quiet. I'm trying to watch." I'm like, "Okay,
Very
my
good.
bad."
Well, I've done that one. I mean, and the interesting thing is the Matrix did not flag it. So what got cut out was not the coverage of the fight scene in the Matrix. It was actually the Sherlock Holmes stuff after it, but it was because it wasn't one or the other. It was because it just hit a threshold.
Right.
But so you can go up if you haven't seen it. For those of you not in the UK or in Germany, but if it turns out, I heard a rumor that if you turn a VPN on, you can go back to watching it as you would before. And of course,
to mention also, Alex,
that video. Yeah, go ahead.
It's a good learning. It's a good learning point because we all these questions keep coming in for new YouTube creators or anybody. What is the threshold? What is a strike? What is a flag? And what does it mean to you if you're monetized or not? So I mean, regardless of the situation, it is a great teaching moment here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, and again, we want to push the envelope a little bit here and there, and look at it again. We're pretty careful about not doing that very often, but when I do it, I'm doing it pretty consciously. I have to admit, I wanted to see what the algorithm was going to do.
Greg?
Oh, sorry, I thought I put my hand down. I was just going to say I scanned it really quickly here off the Office Hours Global site, and it looked like scrubbing through it, I could see everything. So it's live here or available here
In the U.S.?
No, I'm in Canada.
Oh, Canada. Okay, so Canada there.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
And
It's embarrassing.
next question.
Robin Cutshaw in Atlanta, Georgia. Is it possible to set up a 5.1 or 7.1 speaker configuration with Dante so multiple computers can use them? If so, suggested configuration?
Alex?
You should absolutely be able to do that. You're able to route all that audio to, these are just 5.1 and 7.1 are really just channels. So so you should be able to route those to as many groups of those as you would need to do. So that should be 100% possible. And I don't know about suggested configuration. You just need to figure out something that can do all the routing for you. And something that's going to render that if you're coming down from something else. So the challenge will really be if you were coming down from Atmos, as an example, you would have to figure that out. So if I wanted to send the same 5.1 or 5.14, 7.14, 7.1, whatever out, I'd probably want a receiver. And I want to do it from shows that I already have or things that are on Apple TV. What I'd probably do is get a receiver. Monoprice makes one, a couple other folks make them, that have XLRs on the back. And then you just plug those into your system. The problem with all of these is that usually those speakers, the volume for every speaker is tuned to each room. So what you would have to do is figure out how you're going to process it so that you can tune each room for the 5.1. Now, you still get a 5.1 experience, but usually you have a microphone and you're deciding what is the impulse at every mic to get the proper volume at the center of the room or wherever people are sitting. Each speaker has to be tuned to that. And so that's not going to be something that's not generic. So that's the problem that you have, is that you may not be able to send the exact same signal. You would have to send it out to some kind of processing that you're going to use to customize it for that each room's experience to make that work.
Mitchel?
Yeah, Dante's not going to do that natively. You have to put a decoder ahead of it, as Alex was explaining there. And also, just again, I keep reminding people that the back left channel is for me and the back right channel is for Alex.
Yes.
Greg?
Yeah, one thing that I'm looking at within this question is multiple computers can use them. So first of all, if you're on a Mac, of course, you can go in audio MIDI settings and choose your outputs as 5.1 or 7.1 and run it to Dante Virtual Sound Card, and then that'll go through Dante Controller to each speaker. But if you want to use multiple computers, you're not going to be able to do that at the same time. You'd have to have different configurations in Dante Controller every time you want to switch to a different computer. Dante won't sum two inputs to one output for you.
And again, that's where something like a BSS 326 for just pure routing and an 806 might be, with processing, might be something that's interesting. A reminder that we have bought all the ones we use at 090 off of eBay. I shouldn't have said that, because right now they're running between $1,600 and $2,100 typically. They're normally $6,000, $4,000. At that price, it's not worth it. At $2,000 totally worth it. Like they're amazing little boxes.
Yeah, they are. I've done some installations with it. It was a very expensive installation, so that's good. That's a good tip.
I learned about it because I was working at a surround stage in LA, and they literally push a button on a screen, and it changes from the entire configuration of the whole building changes by one button. Using those tools.
Wow! Now, is all this listed in the documentation, or this is the information that you just learned because you tried it and keep pushing the envelope?
I don't even say I tried it. Oh, you mean the documentation for?
Well, the questions like this seems like they're way outside the little booklet that you would get. Of the how-tos.
Yeah, that's why we have office hours.
Of course,
because a lot of the knowledge.
Threw you a softball, brother. I threw you a softball there.
But that's why we have it, is because a lot of the knowledge about how all this stuff works, and even whatever I said might be challenged by other people that have done surround and say, well, there's actually a better way to do this. And I'm surprised, usually if Mickey's listening, he'll usually correct us. That's true. So the Mickey
is always listening. By the way, that's exactly. The Mickey is always listening.
Anyway, so I think that there's so much of production of any trade, there is so much that's just in experience. You cannot learn it in books, and it's something that you just have to do or be around people that are smarter than you in that specific area. Like when I went to that soundstage, the person I'm working with has been doing surround for the last 20 years and done mixing for the last 35 years. So they're gonna. I sitting in the room, I just absorb lots of information.
Okay, I don't know why, but that gave me goosebumps. It's like, wow, the knowledge, the experience there.
Anyway, so that's what you always want. That's what we're trying to do here, is keep on making it better and better. But it's, and then folks come in and the best thing about people who are new is they do things that you shouldn't do and show us folks that have decided that's impossible, that it's possible. And so you get a bit of both. You want people who are starting, who are not, or there's a bunch of things that we've all decided don't work. And you have to have people come in and try that thing, and then show us that it works, and then we'll often tell you that that's a waste of time. and about 80% of the time we're right, but the other 20% is great.
Well, let's keep experimenting. And next question.
Laura Thompson from Beaumont, Texas asked, is the LastPass breach of source code a cause for true concern? Alex.
Not yet. It doesn't look like they've lost any data that would connect us to it. If they know what the source code is, it's much easier to defend. But it could give people a back end to that. I mean, it's not. We don't know yet, I guess, is what we would say. But it does seem like they've taken a pretty outstanding approach of communication even before there's any risk. And I think that if they feel like there's any issue, they'll let us know.
Courtney.
Yeah, Alex said it. It's the customer data wasn't violated, but the source code of the actual code that does the LastPass encryption and decryption, and their development process, some of their development tools, I think, were hacked or stolen. And now it's up to the people that stole it to have enough insight into what they've stolen in order to implement some type of attack on the system, and that may take a period of time, but it is a vulnerability, and even LastPass doesn't know how to protect against that other than rewriting their code. So that might be a problem at this point.
Good insight. And next question.
From Robin Cutshaw in Atlanta, Georgia. Robin asked, if one has multiple HDMI feeds, 8 to 16, that need to go from one side of the room to another, 25 feetish, is there a way to aggregate them on fiber or another media rather than running that many HDMI cables?
I think Mr. Lindsay, sorry, Alex. What's the answer?
There's a couple ways to do that. I mean, of course, you can absolutely convert HDMI to. I would never run lots of HDMI cables a long distance like that. That's something that we try to avoid. The maximum run for me on an HDMI signal is about 12 feet. Now, I know people have used active ones and they're using them hundreds of feet. I tend to, if I need to run a long run, I tend to convert it to fiber, exactly what you're having here. Now, there's a couple different ways to do that. It depends on the resolution as well, whether you're doing 4K or 1080p. You can convert it one signal per strand. And so if you have a bunch of strands, you might have a TAC 12 or a TAC 24 that has tons of strands that you can then just throw things on, and you have converter boxes on both ends. It'll carry the signal. It's not necessarily inexpensive, but it's pretty convenient to do that. The other way to do that is to multiplex onto the same things, and you could get about 8 signals onto a fiber feed at full resolution. It's a little tricky if there's any hard curves, so some of the wavelengths won't make the turn. so you have to. So 4 to 6 is usually pretty safe. Definitely 4. 4 is super solid on a fiber, so you can put 4 lines. 4 video signals. You just have to have something that's able to multiplex those signals onto it. But they're using different wavelengths of light across that fiber. It's just that some of the wavelengths are, if you start stacking it too deep, some of the wavelengths don't handle hard turns very well. So if the fiber's running mostly straight and doesn't have any kinks, doesn't wrap around something, doesn't do anything, that literally it just bounces off the edge of the fiber, and it won't work as well. But 4 is super, like that works all the time. 8 doesn't work all the time. 6 is kind of in between per fiber, but I almost always do 1 signal per fiber.
And Courtney?
I would just, rather than aggregate them into a single cable or convert them to optical, where you have a single point of failure for all of your connections. It depends on what you're running these HDMIs to. If each one is going from a single source to a single destination and you don't need to switch them or route them, I would use red mirror cables, which are HDMI cables that are directional and have amplification chips built into the end. They only go in one direction. And they're usually very narrow, so you can run a lot of them and bundle them together. This way, if one of them fails, if a connector breaks or something in the far end, and then you don't take everybody down with it, which might happen with a fiber. If you get a fiber break or something, then you lose everything. So, and you can, up to 30 feet, you can run HDMI pretty reliably, especially with the red mirror chips in them.
And typically if I'm going to run a long cable with all my signal, I have two of them, and I split enough across them that I don't have to, that I have somewhere to go if something went wrong. But my standard is typically 2 TAC 12s are going to go somewhere. Now I'm usually, the way most of my productions work is I'm hundreds of feet away. So it's not usually like my control room and my cameras are usually in very different parts of the building. So that's usually part of what I'm dealing with, because I don't like being in the space. I like put the camera operators there, the people there, and then we're sitting in a nice air conditioned room somewhere, looking at screens, and I'm very comfortable with that.
And your cup of coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, after reading an article about disruptions to cruise ship traffic due to the Artemis launch, I was curious what challenges production on a cruise ship would bring. I bet you'd have to take a lot of spares.
Mitchel?
Well, the Artemis launch today has been scrubbed for another day, so feel free to cruise the Atlantic.
Alex?
Actually, I ended up at NAB or somewhere like that. I ended up talking to someone who does production on a cruise ship, and they seem to love it. Like, they do a lot of production. Like, there's a lot of video services that are in there, and they have a whole control room for live. They have a control room for building post. They've got a team that's building all those things up, and they get to they definitely have some backups, but they're doing a lot of production there. And these cruise ships are like giant cities that are just floating in the water. They don't really feel them, after the first day or two. And they just said it's a really fun experience that they really enjoyed. And I think when I talked to them, they've been doing it for years, and they really thought it was a good time. Everyone's generally in a good mood.
And how many spares would you take on your cruise ship? One or two or
you're
three
only out for
levels?
a couple days. So I mean, so it's not. I would treat it like any other production. If I needed 8 cameras, I'd take 10. Like that. I don't think I would go crazy and have 16 cameras or something like that. You can always work at a degraded situation for a little while if you have enough of it. Yeah.
And pick it up
because you're not going out for months. Typically, you're going out for 8 to 10 days. It's not like you can never get back. So I think that you probably settle in.
Very good. Courtney?
was wondering if Mitch heard why they scrubbed it. I noticed earlier while I was watching some of the live that they had a camera zoomed in on something that looked like a little bullet hole or something in the side of one of the tanks. I'm not sure if that was
it was the Fetzer valve, Courtney.
Fetzer valve. Do they have to take it into the shop for that?
Valve always gets you.
Yeah. Ball bearings.
Yeah, it's all.
It's the Feldman Fetzer valve. Yes. With the
Peter knows. Peter knows the answer to how many pieces of equipment, and he might. I don't know. Do you know why they scrubbed it? But is that a real question? And you're muted, Peter.
Hydrogen leak, actually. Hydrogen leak on the main tank, on the filler for the main tank, and they couldn't keep hydrogen going into the main tank, so they couldn't fill it up, so to speak.
That was for the first scrub. The one today is the same.
No,
problem.
Today was the filler. It was the filler, not the cooling of the engine. It was the filler.
Not the cooler, the filler. Okay.
And then to answer the actual question, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just remember a long time ago in the service where we had to. You're laughing. You weren't going out for months at a time. Well, aircraft carriers and other things do go out for months at a time, if not a year or two at a time. And you do a calculation on mean time to failure, and you keep appropriate number of spares in cold storage, so to speak, to replace things. And of course, you can get replacements flown in if you're on a carrier, but you can do that. And I followed that motto. You know, you did in your head, Alex. You said, if I need 8, I take 10. That's just making in your head, I might lose 2, therefore I need to have 2 handy. And I follow that same mantra with my stuff that I go around even today. It's the old Boy Scout motto: be prepared.
I do as well, but my wife keeps saying we're getting too much stuff in the house, so got to pare down somehow. Next question.
Niels Brunne from Karlsruhe, Germany, asks, speaking of recording streams, do you think we'll be able to archive the rising amount of digital video data, or will we be losing just as much as during the heyday of tape?
Thanks.
It's really interesting. I read something where someone was talking about this is the most documented generation in the history of humanity, and maybe the most forgotten, in the sense that it's all available to us right now, and one glitch and it would all be gone. Like and suddenly all of our memories and everything else, a giant CMT or CME, other things could wipe out massive amounts of our history because it only exists digitally. It actually got me years ago that's why I bought a printer. And so I print out stuff pictures that I mostly enjoy, that I really want to keep, like if 100 years from now. But it is something that's interesting, is that we have so many pictures of ourselves, but they're all digital. And I know people who have lost a drive and lost everything. Now, most of my stuff lives everywhere, so I don't worry about it as much, but it's a thing.
I don't need pictures of my lunch again, but there's lots of pictures of my grandchildren I would like to keep. So, Courtney?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we only know about the history of ancient man through cave drawings on stone that are carved, and those have existed for thousands of years. So if the cavemen had hard drives, we'd never even know what they did.
They can print everything on stone.
Yeah. No, what was interesting is I attended a SMT meeting on archiving back about 10, 11 years ago, as the movie industry was making the transition to digital distribution and DCI and digital finishing, so that even though they were still shooting on film at the time, a lot of them were transitioning to digital cameras, digital storage, digital effects, digital finishing, DI, digital intermediates, so that there was no final output print form that could be archived. But what a lot of these companies were doing, and they may still be doing as far as I know, is they finish the movie digitally and then they shoot it back out to YCM separations on black and white film and stick it in a salt mine, because that's the they know that that will last over 100 years, regardless of changes in formats or EMP pulses or any other problems, that they'll be able to recover those, cyan, magenta, and yellow masters and be able to reconstitute them into a fairly high resolution full color image. Maybe not 8K, but close.
And I heard the only reason they know it will last 100 years because it has lasted 100 years. So thank you, Hutchinson, Kansas. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, Jonas mentioned that the NASA cameras on the Artemis launch stream probably use UDP video transport over IP. Would they probably be using NDI?
Alex?
I doubt it. They've had a lot of video over IP for a long time, and I don't think that they necessarily would switch to something else because they've been doing. They use variety of video IP between Houston, Atlanta, and DC, and a lot of their subsystems. And so I don't think they would probably shifting that to NDI would probably. They might have some cameras that are on NDI, but shifting the entire infrastructure to something new would be a thing.
Next question.
And it's from Harshid Trivedi, from Daytona Beach, Florida. Mitchel, could you inspire some of the upcoming voiceover folks with a quick read? One without grammar and with maybe, I guess, some kind of thing there. Office Hours Fuel, where we fuel you with the knowledge of AV and media production. Maybe take a ride on our Office Hours space rocket. That's as good as it gets.
I kind of need to hear this. This feels like a voice off. Alex, go for Alex.
No, I'm okay. I don't need to do it.
No, Courtney, you gonna let Courtney? Okay.
Sorry, I'm in noise cancellation mode because it's so hot here. I couldn't do it justice.
Well, there it is. We may have to come back to this. Next question.
It's from Samuel Nordvik in Norway. Has anyone been able to do live translate captioning with Google Translate with somewhat success? If so, how do you do it?
I think you got us stumped, Alex.
Yeah, so the way that we've seen it done, I haven't tried to do it recently, but the way that we've seen it done in the past has been to actually open up Google Meet and put it over black. And there's the translation appears at the bottom, and then we keyed it. We literally keyed it over top of the video to get the Google Translate to be whatever we needed it to be on that area. Google Translate is a API service, so that there are people who are doing this. There's a company, I think, in New York that does this, where they will provide you back in the proper format, 608, 708. They'll provide you back the translation generated from Google Translate. The challenge really is what you want typically is to have somebody type in the English version. So you have someone, you have a system, whether it's a respeak or a stenographer, pushing a human being, putting in accurate English into the Google Translate system is really important. To make that work. Otherwise, it just goes all over the place. But its own system works fairly well. The one that works, in my opinion, the best auto translation is Microsoft. Microsoft has their auto translation that they built around the Skype business, and their business stuff that they built is stunning. I mean, and Google is close, but Microsoft is really, they started that a long time ago, and they've been working on it diligently for well over a decade, and it's really impressive.
Courtney.
Yeah, the problem with using it for live captioning is all these real-time translation software uses not only phonetic lookup, but also contextual lookup. So it looks at the word surrounding it, and it looks up that phrase that is formed by the word that it's stuck in there to see if that's a common phrase, or if it's stuck, there's 5 different pronunciation, meanings of there, is the right one. Which one do they, there sounds like there, it sounds like there, it sounds like there. And they can mean 5 different things. So it has to choose the right word based on the context of the sentence surrounding it. And so what happens is if you watch that stuff work, you see the sentence constantly changing, because it'll say one thing, it'll be the wrong version of the word. And then when you finish the sentence, it'll go, oh, that's what he meant. And it changes the sentence. So using it for live captioning, you would have to delay it a certain amount of time to let it get through that contextualization and arrive at the correct answer before it puts it on the screen. So it's going to be considerably delayed to be correct. Otherwise, you're going to see it constantly changing and be very hard to follow in a live stream situation. And I just tried out, I just got on my new laptop, I tried out the Office 365, the latest version, and I realized that it has a microphone input on it, on Word. So you can just turn on the microphone and talk, and I tried doing some dictation, and it does real-time translation and puts that data into the document, and it does a pretty good job. I was really surprised at the Microsoft's audio transcription.
Yeah, voice to text. I was surprised that Premiere also now does transcription. Not translation per se, but that was a nice new feature. Peter.
Well, I was going to pile on to Alex's statement. Microsoft's been doing this for a very long time. It's amazing to watch, whether it's Skype or Teams. Courtney, it will even translate long languages. If you talk in German and want it transcribed to English, it will do that. It is quite fascinating, the technologies that have come forward. I will say that on the standpoint of Teams, however, you have to be careful. As the administrator, you better set the languages right, because French and French Canadian are not the same.
That is true.
And you get some very odd translations at times.
Hershey.
I wanted to just give some insight on this, kind of towards an accessibility standpoint. So to me, transcription of any sort is a accessibility feature. So there's Live Transcribe as an app that I know that does a lot of captioning and such. So you might consider looking into that as a either app or adding that part of your system. The other thing is there's a website called g.co/disability support. And this gets you connected to the Google side that deals with disability stuff. So if you have a production question or something, and you're trying to say, hey, I have clients that need this information to be worked out properly, you will have the connection with the dev team in the back end to maybe finalize or fix any inadequateness that is offered by Google and get everything on par, because half the time I think we don't utilize half of the stuff that Google makes, and then they just toss it in the bin and it goes to the next the new drawing board kind of situation. So I would highly recommend trying that out to just see if that helps. I know Live Transcribe has come a long way, and they've implemented it into Meet and Duo and a lot of different places, so that the magic sauce is Live Transcribe, and then that gets implemented into their other products. So try those situations out, and of course, as everyone else said, it's always good to have more than one solution.
Oh, I remember Dragon was the solution for the longest time. That helped us speak to text, and then of course we've seen some horrible translations of that too. So, next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. Are you ready for some football? Sorry to wake you up. Today is week 1, day 1. Next week, College Gameday will be in Austin. How can the production of College Gameday and game coverage be improved?
Alex.
Watch Thursday Night Football and copy. Like it's Thursday Night Football. I will say it's had to grow on me. I started watching it again last week. I missed it this week. I had something else going on, but it's state of the art. Like Sunday Night Football. I haven't watched the Sunday Night Football yet, but the Thursday Night Football right now is it's the state of the art for the art form, and everybody should just watch that.
Yeah, because you were a big Sunday night fan. So
yeah. A bunch of the team moved. Anyway,
the production team, you mean?
Yeah. And I haven't watched the Sunday one yet. Okay. But so they're probably both pretty good. But Sunday night and Thursday Night Football are the two big ones to watch. They are the best in the world at what they do. They also have a budget. Do you think the college
college games
but
going to have the same budget?
a lot of look, you might not be able to do all of it at the same level, but a lot of times it's not about it is about the budget to some degree, but a lot of it can be done with less that would close the gap a lot more. The biggest problem with college coverage is the graphics are garish typically. I mean, they're just horrible. Like, I can't watch college football because I hate the graphics so much. I'd rather them just not use any than to what they normally use on college days. I mean, it's atrocious.
Well, Doug Ferguson is listening because he has a contract and he's doing 8 high school. And so he's in week 2
Douglas,
now.
We're counting on you to right the ship. But
there it is. The gauntlet's down.
So horrible. And it's just like, and every time I turn on college football, I'm like, who did this? Like, why would, and it's just pixels on a screen. They're using the same pixels. They just did them badly. And so I think that that would be the first thing. And then I think that, college football could get a lot more experimental. I think that they could be more aggressive with telestration. They could be more aggressive. Typically the hard part is that when you watch broadcast in general, especially like Apple's Major League Baseball, you realize that getting good commentators is hard. There's only so many, there's only, so many Tony Romos and everything else that are out there and great announcers, and it drops off really fast. Like it's amazing. There's 10 people that I can listen to without being frustrated. And then after that, I'm like, okay, I can't listen to these people talk. So I think my problem is that, I don't have a college team that I'm that connected to, that I can see, because I grew up in Pittsburgh, and they don't put a lot of Pitt games everywhere. And so, and I didn't go to Pitt. so I don't have the same connection to it. So I don't have any reason to watch college football, but when I turn it on, so I think that's probably why when I turn it on, I'm extremely focused on how bad the graphics are and the commentation.
But it is fascinating that the barrier has been lowered, and that Douglas now can show up with 5 to 10 cameras.
But again,
for high school, that's
I just
amazing.
Want to point out, if people talk about wanting to get into graphics, take the best and just sit down and reproduce it. Like, if you want to go to college for this, just reproduce what they did and crunch through it and look at what the difference is and close the gap between what you're doing and what they're doing. Now, you'll learn a lot about technique in that process. Now, you don't want to use I will tell you that that's how I built my demo reel. Was I literally just watched broadcast. I captured it on a VHS and I reproduced it pixel for pixel, but then changed a bunch of logos, which are in the same style. And I got a job working. I got my first broadcast job with that demo reel.
The phrase I heard was steal. Go ahead.
Then I started building my own demo reel, because actually that was the only. Here's the worst part. That little demo reel that was a copy of everybody else's work was the only demo reel I've ever made. like as soon as I got in, I was like done. And I think about building demo reels, but I've never actually done another one.
Well, there is a phrase, steal like an artist. And then you look back through the masters, and that's how they learned, was from going and transcribing over the top of it. So, but Douglas is trying, he's got his new Harris switcher. So he's
nice.
Said moved on from the TriCaster. So, Courtney?
I think that'll make the next brave step into esports with college football. Just make the transition that it's completely virtual. That way you don't have these young college kids damaging their brains by running them into each other in helmets. And you just have them sitting in their living room with a mocap suit on and, running in place and catching and powering their virtual teammate, their virtual avatar on screen against the other teams, and have match-offs in esports for full football teams where each player has their own avatar and controls it separately.
Courtney has fun with that, but I will tell you that as soon as game developers understand how to build a spectator game, which they don't know how to do right now, as soon as someone comes in and shows them how to build a spectator game, that will be the biggest industry in sports. The only reason that, it's already exploding. Esports is already exploding, but it's still not what esports thinks is really big is not the same as is an entire machine of local production that happens for sports. They get excited about one event, but they forget that the NFL is running 13 of those every week. It's not, so even if you can get a lot of people to come to one esports event, you couldn't get them to all show up for 13 every week where people, do things about it. Cause they're not spectator sports. If they build spectator games that were there, you could do so much that we're not doing right now. It's painful.
We are coming down to the top of the hour. So I think we're moving on to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael has a question. Why would you want a Dante-enabled speaker? Would it eliminate a point of failure without the third-party DA in the rack?
Sorry, Mitchell. There we go.
It eliminates a lot of wiring, and speaker wire is expensive because it has to be, it's pretty substantial. And you string up 100 speakers in a business somewhere, a retail environment, you're spending a lot of money. So the idea of letting the IT people wire them with Cat 5, Cat 6, whatever, and then have the PoE powering it and using Dante or some type of IP system eliminates a lot of complication and gives you a lot of flexibility. For example, if one of the speakers goes down, the whole system isn't compromised like you would if you had a DA and a bunch of amplifiers in a rack somewhere generating a lot of heat. So I say it's the future. It's the way we're headed, just a matter of time.
And Craig.
Yeah, to continue off what Mitchell was saying, there's certainly when you're dealing with like in-ceiling speakers in shopping malls or businesses, large environments, rather than doing a distributed 70-volt system, you can do something like this where you get more control and an easier cabling system. The big thing in a live situation is you've got that much more control. Like I said, the little Glen sound box that I was showing has value added features to it. It's not just a dumb speaker. You can do control over that same network connection. You get some stuff in large PA systems where there's a lot more control and a lot more data coming back from the speaker using the same network connection, which is really important. Another factor is if you're using, again, in a live situation, a digital mixing console on a Dante network, bumping out of that, if your output is going out into an analog system and then back into whether it's just a digital speaker management system or into a Dante-enabled speaker, you've got latency and conversion going on there, which is just degrading. So keeping it Dante from the console all the way through to the speaker gives you that advantage as well. And then again, the routing flexibility, being able to change things like Alex was saying, being able to change things with a push of a button on a controller, whether it's the BSS or anything like that, even just a different configuration file in Dante controller gives you so much more flexibility over your whole system.
And we're all over the conversation here. As I said, we have a very eclectic group and eclectic questions. Next one.
And it's from Paul Valhus. Speaking of eclectic, he's from Austin, Texas. Someone hacked Russia's largest taxi company and ordered all available taxis to central Moscow, creating a huge traffic jam in the city. Comment?
Courtney?
Trying to get Google Translate to work to translate, "Hey, I'm walking here," into Russian, but I couldn't get it up in time.
Alex, you look like you're ready to say.
So awesome. That's all I gotta say. You just, it just shows you the really what you can do with they say that the error is human, but to really screw things up requires a computer, and you can just see what happens and it's always a lesson in how to over automation or how automation can be hacked. And we always have to be careful. A lot of us think that the AI is going to replace all of us. But there's a good lesson is I was talking to a Boeing engineer about planes, and I said, well, can the plane take off on its own and land? And he goes, oh yeah, absolutely. He said all the stuff, he said pulling out of the gate is complicated because there's a lot of moving parts around the plane and everything else. But once you turn around and get it on the taxiway, you could just let go and the plane knows what to do with that. It can make that work. He goes, we don't usually do that. You usually get it to the runway. You can hit a button and it'll just take off. And when it'll fly to where it was programmed to fly, and it'll land. And I said, oh, and when it lands, he goes, yeah, we have it. It has to do a automated landing once a month to keep the plane certified. And he said, and I said, are those the ones that really just hit the ground really hard? And he's like, no, those are the ones that you barely feel it hit the ground. Like it just suddenly you're on the ground. He goes, because the plane can pay attention to way more than, it has all these sensors, it can pay attention to way more than the pilot can. And so it comes in at a perfect landing is generally the plane. And then the other landings are all the pilots. And I said, well, why do you have the pilots landed at all? And he goes, because it keeps them in practice. He goes, because what happens when the computer doesn't do it right? It's going to, suddenly there's going to be all kinds of plane crashes. And that's what we saw with the 737, MAX problem, which is that the data coming to the plane was inaccurate, and the plane was doing something that it didn't. It was doing something that some pilots couldn't, manage. A lot of pilots, or a handful of pilots, suddenly they weren't getting the right data because it was doing an error, overflow. And so anyway, so it was just interesting to talk to him about it. He goes, you got to keep the pilots able to do it. So when the machine breaks, there's still a human there that can fix it. And so I think that we always have to keep humans, we want to have all the basic stuff done by we can have AI take over a lot of that and algorithms and stuff like that. But we have to always keep the humans in the middle of some of it, to dance between the humans and the machines.
Next question.
Ding dong. Peter Belbin from Houston, Texas. The lens used on a camera can have a large impact on the visual result. What advances in lens tech stand out to you as having significantly advanced the norm? Parfocal lenses is one for me. How about you?
Mr. Lindsay.
Yeah, I mean, the precision in which the lenses can be made now is astounding, and that has been a huge step forward. That an average lens is very, very sharp, and the sharpest lenses are just incredible. And that has been not really a breakthrough, but just an evolution of how to build lenses. And we're also getting much more compact lenses. So you get lenses that have incredible range. Angenieux has a 25 to 250, which is it's still a big lens, but it's much smaller than you would expect for that kind of range. And so those are some of the big things that we're seeing. And then, of course, the autofocus functions have gotten better and better and better for consumer lenses. I mean, film lenses don't really do that, but I think that those are some of the big changes. I think that the art of focusing is something that I've been paying a lot of attention to recently, and we're seeing DJI and Teradek are pushing the outer envelope of that, but especially DJI. If you look at the Ronin, I think 4D, you're seeing an incredible bump in technology where it can keep things in focus. It can show you what's in focus, with a point cloud, and you can take over at any point in time. So this gets back into that human machine thing where we know everybody is in focus, but if you want to rack, you can still do that, and you can visually see what you're doing in a way that a follow focus has never been, operator has never been able to do. So being able to, have all of that I think the focusing is going to be a thing, because I'm watching Alias right now, rewatching it all, almost every night with my kids and my wife. And the funny thing is that about 10% of that show is shot out of focus. And you didn't notice it when you're watching it on SD, but in HD, Sydney or her dad's out of focus all the time, just all the time. And what it was is that I was talking to someone about it, and they said, well, when you'll notice it's out of focus when they're trying to make an emotional point, because what they did is they shortened the depth of field really tight to have that really soft, we're really close on them and it matters, and everything else is out of focus. And it's TV; they're moving fast, and they didn't have the monitors we have now when they shot that, and they just didn't get it.
How do you feel about stabilization inside a lens?
The optical stabilization has made a huge difference. It's not as swimmy anymore. That was the big problem with box lenses, is they'd kind of get lost, and they'd start to swim around a little bit, and the new lenses, the new Fujinons especially that we've used, these are 100x, lenses. I don't see any swimming in them at all. They seem to be just rock solid, and with them on, when you turn them on, a lot of people don't turn them on. They put them on really stable situations, but in corporate environments, we have to, because you're sitting on a, like a good example is San Jose Convention Center sits over top of parking garage. So every truck that moves below you is creating a little bit of vibration. And so those are the kind of things we have to deal with in corporate.
Or a spider, 600 feet back in the back of the hole. Next question.
And it's from Douglas Carmichael. I read an article about College Gameday using a drone more this season. Wouldn't it be a lot harder to pilot a drone in a crowd-dense environment like a sports stadium?
I'm very curious about this, Courtney.
It'll probably be more illegal, but you have to have a licensed pilot and get clearance from the FAA to do something like that. DJI just released this new FPV drone, which is probably pretty amazing because it's fairly lightweight. It has protection amongst the rotors there, so that you're not going to saw somebody up if you fly it into them. And you get some amazing 4K footage out of the thing live. So maybe they're going to be using something like that to fly over a limited period of time to get some amazing footage, zooming down and zooming around. Of course, if they've got a sky cam or a wire cam, that'd be a lot of things to avoid because the drone is going to have to watch out for all those wires that are heading above the field. So
that's what I was thinking.
It'll be a challenge.
The installation of more cable cams and sky cams, possibly. That'd be really surprising to be flying drones in a big crowd. That'd be a heavy insurance policy, but maybe we'll find out. Craig?
Yeah, I haven't seen any of the football drone shots really, but I've seen some of the stuff in Formula One where they've been trying it, and to me, it still looks very gimmicky. They're doing a lot of the really fast changes of direction and stuff. And personally, I'm not a fan of it yet. I see the advantage of where it's going, but obviously with the way that some of the racers, the drone racers and stuff are being able to pilot some of this. Some of the footage that we're getting from some of these drone pilots is really, really incredible for other things. So hopefully they'll get out of this sort of gimmicky stage and get into some really, really good shots.
Wow. Technology screaming forward. But it's still back to story. And let's move on to the next question because last one for the day, the origin of story.
And here it is from Juan C. Robles in Mexico City, Mexico. Any first impressions of the new Lord of the Rings series?
Nobody's raised their hand, but I did hear about it from the waiter at the restaurant that we were at last night. And the immediate conversation was, is it as good as the movie? And then that whole thing became, is it as good as the book? So it is what it is in the context of how it was made. Like Alex mentioned, a TV timeline to create a TV show is not the same as it was to make the movie. And of course, the imagination is so much bigger and grander than what you can get out of a book in reading. So, Alex, what's your thoughts?
It's actually one of the few fictional books I've read, but I haven't read it in a long time. I mean, I don't think I read it probably twice before I was 14, but I haven't opened the book again. So what I do find is that when you read the book, you have a lot more context for a lot of the things that are there. This time frame is not something that I really know anything about. So I'm actually looking forward to it because I mostly didn't. I mean, you taught it. I didn't read a lot of the earlier prequels to Lord of the Rings, and so I think that it's going to be really interesting for a lot of people. I have not seen it. We're gonna watch it this weekend, or watch the first episode this weekend. I'm pretty excited about it. They everything from people that I used to work with at visual effects companies and some that still work there have been raving about it. They just said for TV, it's raised a new bar. Like it's not, maybe not necessarily for film.
Are they using a volume? Are they using a?
I don't know. I'm going to try to find out more information about it. But yeah, I don't know what they're using for it. But it's a lot of folks have said that it's just super impressive. So.
Well, Juan, you've raised a good question for the rest of us to go look at that experience. And my one comment would be with regards to books. I'm doing a parallel path with the C.S. Forester Hornblower series, and the inner monologue of the captain in the books is very dense versus in the film that's supposed to be shown in the emotion or by the director. And I'm seeing the comparisons of the different mediums. Yeah, the book stirs your imagination where it's up to the director and the production crew to hopefully bring that to the screen. And that sometimes can happen and sometimes doesn't. So, well, look at that. We have gone through and answered questions. We have had a great time together. So I think we're going to ask the amazing crew from the back of the behind the panel and behind that makes all of the ticks and the talks happen. Bring up the credits and say, have a great day. This is where the whispering begins.
Yes, this is where the whispering begins.
Okay, good.
Only whispering.
Only
for Mitchell.
NHL. First FPV drone footage.
Peter's whispering. I'm not. And I could tell Courtney's whispering.
Peter, it's great when you whisper that you're not whispering.
Reverb.
This cancellation takes my whisper out, though.
I can't wait to spread this into 5.1 so we can have 5.1 and whispering. So your little
Whispering
voices
and